Hi everyone, welcome back. A little Q&A today about infertility, my own infertility story, journey, whatever you want to call it. You might remember that about a month or so, maybe a couple of months ago, I did a video on my other channel, The Uphill, about my infertility story. And if you haven't seen it, it might be a good idea to watch that before you watch this one, because some things I'm not going to explain again. I'm going to link to that here, probably on the screen at the end, and I'll put a big link below as well. So if you haven't seen that, go and watch it now and then come on back and we'll carry on with the video. So first of all, thank you to all of the people who commented and emailed me and left me messages about their own miscarriages or infertility problems and things that they'd gone through. It was all very, very touching, very moving, and so many people with sad situations that haven't been rectified. And so, you know, I'm always very grateful for what I have, but it made me even more so when I read about some people who haven't managed to have children and are now at a place where they can't then have them and haven't managed to adopt or you know, go through any other route for having children. So I suppose I start this video with the huge premise that I feel very lucky to now have 2 children. Angelica's just turned 3 and Ted is 16 months. So I have 2 children, but at many, many points in my infertility period, I thought that I would never have children. I took 6 years to get pregnant with Angelica. Really didn't think that it would happen. Took a few years to get pregnant the first time, had a miscarriage at 11 weeks or a missed miscarriage. And then it was ages again until I got pregnant. And in that time, I had been for various tests and all of the things that they do. And nothing was wrong that they could see, but obviously something was wrong because otherwise I would have got pregnant. Although maybe it wasn't the right time, but I think that that is a whole other video, because I sometimes think to myself, well, you know what? I did get pregnant. I got pregnant 3 times and I had 2 healthy babies from those 3 pregnancies. So maybe some people just take longer to get pregnant. Is that a possibility? Because, you know, this is a video that I'd like to do. Is the labelling of somebody infertile a helpful thing? Are they actually infertile, or do they just take longer? I don't know. If a doctor could comment on that, or somebody that was an expert, that would be great, because I'm genuinely interested. Whether that medical cut-off point that they say, is it 2 years or something, if you haven't conceived in 2 years, is that a helpful thing? Is that something that's been researched, or is that a sort of administrative deadline that is put on it by the medical profession? Because I suppose that you have to, in terms of being able to treat people or start treatment, you need to have your own sort of professional milestones that you look at. I completely understand that, but I do wonder whether maybe I was just somebody that just took longer. I don't know. I'm doing a whole separate video because I know lots of people want to know the things that I did. I'm going to touch on them in here, but the things that I did and I think I did that maybe helped me to get pregnant successfully. But, you know, maybe if anybody's an expert out there and would like to do maybe a series of videos, answer some questions, I am more than happy to come and see you, and we'll sit and have a chat and a cup of tea. And, you know, if it's going to be helpful for people watching, I would love to do that. So shouting out to experts out there if you're watching. So one of the biggest questions that people asked, they asked me to expand more on the whole acupuncture, Chinese medicine thing that I touched upon in the infertility video. Now, I was wary of talking too much about this because I am by no means saying that the Chinese medicine aspect of what I did before I got pregnant was how I got pregnant. I have absolutely no idea whether that worked, whether it was a complete load of nonsense. Who knows? However, what I will say is that I tried for 6 years and didn't have a successful pregnancy, but I started the acupuncture and my Chinese herbs that I took that I forgot to mention last time, and I was pregnant within a few months. I think it was about 6-7 months, and I also felt completely different. My health was completely different. I had very strong nails, whereas before they had always been breaking. My hair was really shiny and strong. Again, my hair had been terrible before. I put weight on because maybe I wasn't underweight, my BMI was absolutely healthy, but maybe for me, for my frame, for fertility and for being able to get pregnant, maybe I wasn't my optimum weight. Who knows? So I'm not here, this is not a video advert for acupuncture and Chinese medicine. However, I can't deny the fact that those two things happened in synergy. I did that, I felt a lot better. I felt that I went to see John Sagaris. So I had a free initial consultation with him and I paid for it from then on. And I have to admit, I was a bit like, is this going to be a really expensive waste of time? But as it turned out, it was the best thing that I ever did because I now have 2 children. I didn't do it for the second time because I had sex once and got pregnant with Ted. Don't even think we did it properly. Won't go into too much detail, but put it this way, it wasn't like some the kind of sex that you do, I can't believe I'm talking about this, it wasn't like the kind of sex that you do to get pregnant when you're really trying to get pregnant, you know, like legs up afterwards and all that kind of stuff that we go crazy doing. So I just did it for the first time and there was no denying that that happened, my health got better and I got pregnant. In the initial consultation, which is I suppose why I kept going back, he sat down and we just talked for ages, and at so many points I thought I was going to burst into tears. So I had already started the whole medical infertility process once before, and then I interrupted it because I got pregnant and then I miscarried. And then this was a couple of years later, I thought, look, enough's enough, and I went to see a doctor again, my own GP, and then she referred me to the infertility clinic, and obviously she'd seen me years before, so she was just like, look, just go straight in, you know, there was no waiting time, she just referred me. So I was doing that in tandem, but I felt that the medical route of looking into my fertility was very much like I had this big folder and it had infertility clinic stamped on it, which made me feel like shit and made me feel really helpless about things. And I'd had all of the very clinical tests. So, you know, we'd done the sperm test and that was absolutely fine. I'd had my tubes tested where they inject the dye and that was all fine. And all of the sort of preliminary things that they tick off before they start you on IVF or anything else, I had done, and there wasn't any problem. But when I sat down with John, he asked me so many weird and wonderful questions about myself and the type of person that I was. For example, I'm a really nervy person. So, you know, some people can sort of walk home in the dark and they don't think twice about it. And they're not thinking like someone's going to jump up behind me. Oh my God, what's that in the bushes? Every little noise. They're not really jumpy. I'm a very jumpy person. And I've got a lot better actually over the last few years since having children. But, you know, I was a very, very nervous, very anxious, very sort of scared of what people thought, very scared of confrontation. And I don't know whether it's because I've had children now that I'm slightly different. Maybe I've grown up a lot. I don't know. But I'm a stronger person. And so he asked lots of questions about that and lots of questions about my general health and my digestion and any illnesses and things like that, and looked at my skin, looked at my tongue, looked at my eyes, my hair and everything. And then he sort of sat back and told me about myself. And it was just really weird to hear. And as I said, I nearly burst into tears a lot of times when I saw John. But it was like he had put together, without me explicitly saying certain things about myself, he'd put together a profile of me and he was reading it back. And there were so many things that I hadn't ever realised about myself that he told me. And he sort of did this overall picture of my health, and it was incredible. And it really made me realise that my health wasn't great. You know, I looked good, and I thought I ate reasonably healthy. I didn't smoke, didn't do drugs, didn't really drink to excess. You know, like your normal sort of 30-ish-year-old. If I went out with friends, then yeah, I'd drink a load of wine, and I probably went out, oh God, I mean, I don't go out at all now, but I might have done that a couple of times a week. But you know, overall, I did a moderate amount of exercise. I thought that I was quite healthy, but when we actually talked about it, I realised there were big flaws in my health. I was very vitamin D deficient, actually, and that was something that came out of one of the tests that I'd had done with my blood tests. It was just so helpful sitting down and talking to somebody about myself and the overall picture, which had never been done on the medical route, that it was like this huge weight had been lifted off my mind. And that was the first step to, I think, everything falling into place. And even if it wasn't the acupuncture that John did, or the herbal sort of tablets that he prescribed for me, even if it wasn't that, I would fully say that he instigated my whole sort of new route to fixing my fertility, if there was ever a problem with my fertility. So I started taking a lot of vitamin D. I almost entirely cut out drinking, really. Took it right down to answer someone's question, because they said, do you cut out drinking? I took it right down, and do you know what? When I fancied having some wine with friends, I did, but it was there. I was consciously thinking about, you know, is this a wasted night out? Not literally wasted, but is this a night out that I really need to get absolutely hammered on? Or should I save that for something else? And just gradually, actually, those nights started to disappear completely. And it was really good practice, because can't get hammered now. Not really, not when, you know, unless I could go on holiday for a week and without the children and sort of do it on the first day, I might be just about recovered by the time I got home. So that was good practice. As I said, I'm really wary of, I'm not an expert at all, and I'm very wary of prescribing somebody who's in a vulnerable state something that's worked for me that might not work for them. But I think it's at least worth reading about, and maybe, you know, I'll try and find a couple of links below so that I can put below for you to have a look at if that's helpful for you. So that's what I did. That's just to expand on the whole Chinese medicine acupuncture. Lots of other people asked specifically about the medical route, which I did as well, obviously. And so the initial tests on that, I think, were blood tests for me, sperm tests for my husband. Everything came back fine apart from vitamin D, but apparently literally everybody is vitamin D deficient. So I got onto that. And then I had to go back, and I have got a mental block on all of this, I have to say, because it was not a good time for me. But I went back and had my tubes tested. I had scans on my ovaries and on my womb to make sure there was nothing sort of untoward going on. Internal examinations, always a joy. And then eventually I got referred from Whipps Cross, because I lived in East London, their fertility place, to St Bart's. And at St Bart's, they sort of looked at all my notes and everything, and, you know, you have a chat, and then they said, right, we'll start you on the first hurdle. I didn't actually ever find out what the first thing was going to be, the first treatment. I'm sure that they told me. I honestly can't remember. It must be in a letter somewhere. I blanked it out, but about 2 weeks before I was supposed to go, I found out I was pregnant with Angelica, and I never had to go. For someone else that asked where my husband was in terms of lots of the appointments and things like that, both times that I instigated the fertility sort of train with the NHS, I went myself the first time to see my GP. And I don't even think I told him I was going, to be honest. I think I'm not going to make a sweeping statement about men and women, but talking to my friends especially, you know, it's usually the women that pick up on the problem first, or sort of get a bit more paranoid and worried about it. And so I hadn't really discussed it at great length with him. And then the doctor said, oh, you know, the first time, see how it goes a bit, and then nothing happened. So she booked in the initial tests and the sperm test, and so obviously he had to go for that. But funny enough, the day before he was supposed to go for that first ever sperm test, which he never went for, because I got pregnant with a baby that I miscarried. So the next time that we started off with the whole fertility business, he sort of accompanied me from the beginning, really. Apart from the first one that I went to with GP, there were a couple of appointments that he didn't need to be at, and so I just thought, well, that's pointless, because, you know, you've got to take time off work and things like that. So I went on my own, and he didn't come with me for the dye test on my tubes. I partly wish that I'd had somebody with me, but actually, do I want somebody there when my legs are like up in stirrups with tubes going up me and I'm crying? I'm not sure that it would have made it any better for me. I think I'd have just cried more. So yeah, I did that on my own. I'm sure he would have come with me, but I was just like, no, that's not happening. So to answer the question for the lovely person that said, you know, how much involvement was there and how many appointments did you go to together, hopefully that answers that question. Someone has asked about ovulation sticks and how I predicted ovulation. I just used those, you can get them for like £1 for 100 off eBay. They look like the hospital pregnancy strips. So they're just a strip and they've just got a plastic bit at the top that you hold and you dip them into your wee. And they're really, really cheap, thank God, because if I'd done anything else, I mean, I would have been bankrupt. I did, towards the end, have one of those machines that you put the stick into and then it reads it and tells you when your good day is going to be. To be quite honest, I don't think that you particularly need one. Also, those pregnancy ones that they do on eBay, sometimes they throw in a couple of pregnancy ones into your ovulation sticks pack, which is nice, isn't it? If you are obsessed with testing for pregnancy, as I was, then those are the cheapest ones, and they work exactly the same as Clear Blue or any of those digital ones. They're literally a waste of £7 or £8. So just go for the test strips. Because yeah, otherwise you're burning money, and there's nothing worse than getting a negative pregnancy test and spending £8 to get it, is there? So I used those strips, and now I realise, yeah, that I ovulated on day 8 or day 9, and my mum always told me to look out for that, and I never listened to her. So that's what was happening, and I do think maybe that had something to do with the fact that it took me so long, because I was always aiming for day 14, day 15, where I got the tiny rise in my strips, instead of what I now know would have been a huge indication on the strips if I'd done it on day 8 or day 9. So that's what I did. Lots of people asked, did I not do the temperature thing? To be quite honest, I think that most of the time I buried my head in the sand about stuff, and I didn't really want to have to put that much effort in, because if I did, then it was admitting that there was something wrong. So I just didn't do that. And also, it seemed like a right faff. I mean, like, you had to take your temperature, not move. I couldn't get my head around it. So I didn't do that. Someone else has asked, did you feel that your infertility was something that you wanted to discuss with other people? You did openly discuss, and absolutely not. I felt really, really ashamed of it in a way. I just felt like it was a failing, and I'm not good at admitting failures. Not admitting failures, but I'm not very good. I sort of hide my weaknesses, I suppose, and I don't like people to see my weaknesses. And so I didn't talk to anybody about it really, apart from my husband and parents, my sister. You know, when other people got pregnant and had babies, I felt very bitter about it because I couldn't talk about my own experience really. Miscarriage was slightly different because lots of people I knew had miscarried, and so gradually they sort of came out of the woodwork and talked about their own experiences. But infertility just wasn't so easy, and as I said, I felt like a real failure about it, and it wasn't really something that I wanted to shout about, if that makes any sense. Somebody has asked a question that's not really directly an infertility question, but more a miscarriage one, and that's how to stay sane in early pregnancy after you've had a miscarriage, a previous miscarriage. Now, there are lots of people online who are probably more qualified personally to answer this because they've had multiple miscarriages, and my heart absolutely goes out to them. But I would say for me that both times I got pregnant after having a miscarriage, the singular best thing that I ever did was going for early scans. And again, this is a financial issue, I suppose, because they're about £100 each if you go privately. But I went at 6.5 weeks both times, or 7 weeks, just because I couldn't cope with not knowing what was going on. And I had read that lots of miscarriages that happen later on in the weeks actually happened. The baby stopped growing, or the heartbeat stopped way before, or the heartbeat never actually really started. But you show as being pregnant on a pregnancy test. And so both times I went, first time I went to Harley Street, maybe it was both times, but also at bigger mother care branches, they have like this sort of ultrasound centre that's sort of shoved in the mother care, and baby sound, maybe it's called. I'll look it up for you and I'll put the link. And I went to those loads because there was a massive mother care near where I lived, and I could just pop down there and just reassure myself that everything was fine. There are other things that you can do to reassure yourself, but I think nothing compares with someone saying, yeah, there's a heartbeat, everything's fine. You know, at least for now, as much as you can say, everything's fine. And especially if you have spotting, as someone else has asked me a question, did you have spotting? Never with Angelica, but I did have it with Ted very early on, and it was quite a lot of it. And I thought, well, that's it then, that's game over. I was actually in Paris and I was doing a massive advertising job, and we were at a dinner, and I was really pissed off anyway because it had been a really early start, like 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was midnight, and this dinner had taken hours and hours, and I could feel it happening. I could feel something weird, and I couldn't go, I couldn't do anything about it. I went to the loo, I saw what was happening, and I ended up just getting really annoyed and saying, I've got to go now, it's just too late, this is ridiculous. But really I was just absolutely torn apart by the fact I thought that I'd started to miscarry. As it happened, the bleeding stopped a day later, maybe a couple more spots, and then that was it, and there was absolutely no problem for the rest of the pregnancy. But I know people that spotted the entire way through their pregnancies and been absolutely fine. And I think a lot of spotting is just normal spotting. Unfortunately, it's also a sign of miscarriage. So, you know, it is a petrifying thing to happen when you're in early pregnancy. But as I said, early scans, you know, if you can scrape it together for just the one right at the start, then amazing, because you then get your one at 12 weeks, and hopefully if everything's fine, you know, you just go along the normal path, and by then it's sort of a bit, you feel a bit more secure about it. But if you can, you know, as many as you need to go for to reassure yourself and stop yourself from going absolutely insane, then I think do it if you can. And if you can't, then maybe, you know, beg your doctor and see if they'll do it for you. So I hope that that has answered some of your questions. I am going to do a couple more videos on this, and as I said, if anyone's an expert out there and it can help me and us with our questions that we have, and any other bits and pieces that people might find useful, but if this just gives some comfort or help to 1 or 2 people out of the people that watch it, then that is fine by me. I'm well aware that while I've been talking, light has been coming through this window and just doing crazy things with me, with my face. So that was probably a really stupid place to sit. But good luck, everybody, if you are trying. And, you know, if you feel that there's something wrong or it's taking too long and you haven't been to see anybody, go and see somebody, because as soon as you make that first step, or it was the case for me, that as soon as I made that first step, it was just like this huge weight had been lifted off me. I felt like I'd transferred the responsibility and the worry to somebody else, to a doctor. you know, and also I felt like I was in safe hands with them, that somebody was going to take charge of my body for me and help me. And although that isn't strictly true, I think mentally, whatever you can do to have a positive mental effect is good. So do what you need to do, but, you know, start the ball rolling if you feel like that's what you need to do and it's time. Because the longer that you leave it, the longer that you stew, the worse it becomes mentally. It's like really dramatic light change then when I said that. Right, I'm going to go because it's driving me mad. I shall see you next time.